I cast the last unmoving body aside and slowly strolled back to the tripod. Without looking at the pictures, I switched off the camera and put it back into my rucksack that was still leaning against one foot of the tripod. I had plenty of time until the sunset, and as usual, I would not hurry with the last action I had to accomplish before I could head home. Nobody would want to see what came after the killing blows. That was why I turned off the camera after those 8 shots. Even though it was unlikely that anybody would ever see my photographs, I too didn't want to see what came afterwards. I always made sure that none of the wanderers were moving anymore. There was always a risk with those beasts. They couldn't be killed easily. Despite having discovered that they could be defeated through decapitation and fire, I wasn't genuinely certain that losing their head would hold them completely back from standing up again. That's why every time after removing all of the zombies' heads and shoving the remnants into a small pile, I tucked some dry pages of newspapers around the borders of the bodies and held them down with as much stones from the surrounding area as I could find. I never went out with less than 2 lighters in my pockets, and not because I was a hardcore smoker. The fire licked over the paper and burned my fingers before I flung it onto the pile of dead, rotting bodies. I actually didn't care if the fire would move on to the forest next, but I stayed put nonetheless. Sitting by my tripod that was now lying folded together in the grass, I watched the flames wipe out the last bits of the wanderers. It was smelling awfully, like every other time, and I tried to breathe shallowly and into the collar of the long-sleeved shirt I was wearing beneath my jacket. With time, the shadows grew bigger and the trees in front of me darker. I better got going. The late sun had already vanished behind the high treetops as I finally rose to my feet and started to stamp onto the smoldering pile of glowing ashes to smother the fire that still lay within. Throwing my backpack over one shoulder, I grabbed the tripod and headed back into the opposite direction, away from the darkening forest and away from the last shreds of the wanderers' dead bodies. 2 minutes afterwards, I reached the front yard of my current home. With my foot, I pushed open the creaking gate to the garden and strode up to the back door. While briefly glancing over my shoulder, I fumbled for the keys in one of the pockets of my jacket. Even though I knew nobody would come sneaking through my stuff or go for the small room where I kept all my food, I always locked the door when I went out. Call it an old habit, I called it precaution. Those dead things might not have an active brain left, but sometimes I swore they sensed the items that were still essential to us remaining humans. That could have been why there were so few of us left. I always tried to assure myself that there were some of us left, but at more difficult times, I wasn't so sure anymore if there still were others. I've never met a fellow survivor in those last months. I firmly locked the door again after entering the house. My boots were contaminated with reeking dirt and other revolting fluids, and I quickly cleaned them with a wet towel I kept in the hall for exactly those kind of occurrences. Even though I didn't stay long in one place, I also wasn't an animal. Not yet. I was thrilled that I still had the opportunity to shower and wash myself once in a while. I probably wouldn't have survived that long if there hadn't been a drop of clean water since day one. Walking through the kitchen into the adjoining lounging area of the house, I put down the tripod and pushed it under my desk. I wouldn't need it for the next couple of days. My jacket went flying into one corner of the room, my backpack into another, after I had retrieved my camera. While the ancient computer that was again alarmingly low on battery was booting up, I went on a walk around the house. Front door was shut and locked, check. Back door too, double check. Windows were closed, shutters were down, yes. And yes. It fortunately hadn't taken long to find a bungalow when I had first arrived. I always was relieved when I spotted one and didn't have to take cover inside a huge mansion, where it would take me no less than a quarter of the night to check if every entrance and back door was sufficiently secured. And it was reassuring that there wasn't a cellar with a hidden door through which something could get inside without me noticing. I let myself gulp down half a bottle of water and ate a couple of dried fruits right out of the packet. Then I slumped down into the most comfortable chair I had been able to find, and I was now standing in front of my current working desk. Meanwhile, the computer monitor had changed from lifeless black to a light shade of blue. I typed the rod 2002 into the darker rectangle in the middle of the screen. It had taken me a while to figure the password out, and it had resulted in not having internet access in over a day, but still I respected the person who once had owned this place and their love for a guitar. I readjusted my binder beneath my clothes where it was a bit too tight. Then I connected the camera to the computer and was set to go. The transmission of my newest pictures would take a few moments. So meanwhile, I figured it was time for my daily prayer that the internet was still intact and would let me work without catastrophic malfunctions. I had a tiny heart attack when the desktop picture didn't change and the icon of the web browser stayed silent and unmoving. Finally, there was the almost inaudible pling in the side when the sedative white color of the homepage appeared. Another silent sound announced that my pictures were now uploaded onto the computer desktop and ready to post. Before opening my blog, though, I went through the photographs that were now displayed in front of me. I instantly deleted the test shots. The others were brilliant once more. I really liked the background this time. While the forest had looked dull and cold in the test shot, the motionless trees created a perfect contrast to the scenes in the front of the 8 more lively pictures. Usually, there were 1 or 2 shots that were blurred or that just didn't look great. That was always the case. Still, I was disappointed that this time it wasn't different. I had positioned the tripod a few yards to the left to where I assumed the wanderers would exit the forest. This way, my back wouldn't block the view of the real action. But of course, while the numbers had ticked down before my inner eye, I had miscounted again. I scoffed at the unidentifiable blur of colors in the 6th picture. I could recognize 2 beings on the screen in front of me, but if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't be able to distinguish the dead one from the living. Shaking my head, I muttered a quiet "doesn't matter," which was a bit too high for my own liking. As much as I was pissed about that picture, I knew that I wouldn't be disappointed by the final one. And I sure as hell wasn't. The 8th picture looked fantastic. I had focused my eyes right at the camera, and now I felt as if the me in the picture could see their present self through the lens of the past camera. The dark line of black blood that had appeared across the 5th wanderer's throat looked like a colorless void separating its head from its body. Grinning like the smug idiot I was, I logged into my account and finally opened my blog. With the button New Entry, I was about to upload today's set of pictures when I realized the blinking in the top left corner of the screen. The grin slowly dissolved from my lips and I felt a knot appear inside my stomach, while simultaneously my hands began to tremble. 3 words had materialized on the bright green bar at the top and were now flashing every other second. 3 words that I could have sworn I would not read again in this life.